silent, you'll not find love. Only sleepless nights. I'm just a ghost of the man I was, too weary to fight. My nights would be better spent staring at the open sky.
Hey guys, welcome to Beyond the Beard, podcast dedicated to discovering true masculinity. Thanks for joining us today. We have an awesome guest, my buddy, Sam Pilli.
Without a beard.
Without a beard, we did make an exception. Mike, Matthew, and I had to form a quorum, and then we had to, raise the issue, and then it had to be voted on, and, back and forth, but we did allow Sam. So thank you. Sam, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do, man?
Cool. Well, Tim, thank you for allowing me here. And Mike, thank you for allowing me here. Thank you for allowing me here without a beard. However,
it is,
I think it's possible to digitally enhance the beard look, probably.
We could do that. We can work on that
do that,
for you.
right? So,
wouldn't it be white though?
No, it would be. Look, bro, you got.
I got way more than
so,
you do,
know,
so it's fair.
So, but so my name is Sam Pilli. I moved here from San Francisco 2 years ago with my wife and son. So far, just enjoying it immensely over here.
Yep.
My first month here, literally 2 years ago, I was at Loyal Coffee, sit and do my thing and get harassed by guys sitting next to me all ripped and stuff. I'm like, ugh. So I introduced myself to Tim. And
The ripped guy was not me, by the way.
yes, and that was Tim, and we've been friends ever since.
It's true.
So,
It's true. Sam, okay, so let's back up. What brought you out here?
Well, good question. So it really was a lot of prayer. And my wife and I were praying about it, and just the Lord started giving us more clear direction as to having to leave the Bay Area. And obviously our whole family's there.
Yeah.
That's where we grew up. But it was just such a clear calling that it was almost like there was no doubt God wanted us to leave and get out. And so, and the interesting part was that the verses that we started getting were similar to what my parents got when they immigrated to the United States.
Wait, you're not from the U.S. originally?
No, I am not. Does that mean I'm kicked off the show?
No.
Okay. We allow everybody
as long as they have a beard.
The border's open.
Yeah,
the border's open. Yeah. So we actually did not come through the southern border. We actually had to go through a whole process.
Weird.
There was actually we had to provide financial documents. We had to do immunization. We had to wait. A long process, but we eventually got here through a boat and a camel and all the rest. But we moved to Pacifica, California, where it's about 50 minutes south of San Francisco.
Cool.
And then praying about it, and the Lord made it clear that we need to move here. So we are.
And so one of the things that I think brought you here too was the company that you founded.
Yes. So my background is in real estate, and I love people. I love connecting with people, and Tim knows that.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately and unfortunately. He also loves people. He's, just as popular. But so I started a company called ZonZon. It was through my experience with real estate, where a lot of my clients were in apartments or condos, didn't know their neighbors, didn't have community. And so that was a genesis of starting this company, which is, let's start bringing people back together where they live.
Yeah.
Like we talked earlier, we have so much more in common than we have that separates us. And unfortunately, politicians, media companies, they divide us. And I'm like, but when you're sitting in front of Tim, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter where they're from, what they do. It's Tim and me having coffee, right? So, and the whole idea is if we can start bringing people together, we can start changing the environment.
Yeah. Oh, and that's really kind of the first conversation you and I had was really about building communities.
Yeah.
And so, and ZonZon is working with multifamily units?
Yes. Yep. So we, when looking at the landscape in terms of where we can be most effective and where there is the highest likelihood of commonalities, we started looking at apartment buildings where the demographic in every apartment community is fairly similar because they've got to qualify for the certain income,
Sure.
certain rent, all that. So, and if you think about it, the more people that congregated in a dense place with certain income, certain kind of demographic,
Sure.
you are likely to have people that like the things you do, having a similar lifestyle like you do, in a similar life stage as you are.
Mhm.
And so you have a lot of commonalities that are just not connected.
Yeah.
So it's like, imagine if you could start unlocking all those connections, all of a sudden it just becomes vibrant and people start caring for one another,
Yeah.
helping one another, etc.
Yeah. You build tight-knit communities that really bring value to life.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the things that the US and honestly probably the Western world
Mhm.
is really missing. At least the US. I mean, I think Europe's probably a little bit better at it than we
Yeah.
are, but just that sense of community, that
Yeah.
sense of togetherness. And honestly, it's why we're easy to divide.
Yep.
At least that's my
Yeah.
personal opinion.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about let's talk a little bit about what your thoughts on masculinity are, man. Obviously our show here is really trying to dive into, what does it mean to be a man,
Yeah.
right? For you, and I think you provide an interesting background in that you grew up in the US,
Mhm.
but you also had time in India, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you got to see kind of two different cultures. Coming up growing up with that background, what are your thoughts on masculinity?
Well, I think that, I mean, I moved here when I was young, so I have limited experience, like thinking about the Indian background. But I think masculinity, I think in my view, is being genuine and real
Okay.
with all its flaws.
Okay.
And I think that's what is kind of masked here
Mhm.
In the US and maybe all of Western society. But, there's a sense of I've got to pretend like I am stronger than I am. I've got to pretend like I've got no problems. I've got to pretend like I'm not struggling with anything. And then you put up this false facade, which is not real, but, that's why I love the Bible, where throughout the scripture, God gives real clear accounts of people and all their failures. He's not masky. He's like David, as you know, just screwed up royally, but God put his good and his bad right there. So I think that when we can start going back to being genuine, real, and authentic, we become more masculine, because now, because our whole goal is not to point to ourselves, but point to Christ, right?
Yeah.
Who is the like the ideal man, if you will, right?
Yep.
And so, but I think if we could start becoming more genuine and authentic, I think, in my view.
No, that's good. When you're saying those, do you have any examples, like maybe that you would say, when I look at this guy, I would say he's genuine and authentic?
Good question.
I mean, I know you said Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the ultimate model is Christ, you
Yep.
know? And so when we look through the Gospels and we see Jesus in all his different interactions, we see a real man filled with the Spirit of God, doing things that are extraordinary, actually caring and having compassion, but at the same time, being able to deal with the brutality of the cross and all the rest of that. I mean, you have one on all spectrums that you're like, wow, this is a real man,
Yeah.
right? And so I think it'd be hard to find people in today, or even, throughout history, to find like, that's a real man. I think
Sure.
the ultimate obviously is Christ.
Yep.
But the other example I would say would be like David. He was like just authentic and real.
Yep.
He screwed up royally, but as soon as he found out that he messed up,
Yeah.
he like repented, confessed, and like, I was wrong, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, and that's something like I struggle with, right? It's like, especially in a family environment where you don't want to say like, I'm sorry, I screwed up. But, it's like you want to have this false bravado, if you will,
Sure.
to pretend like, no, I did the right thing and I acted the right way. And
Yeah.
most of the times we don't.
No. You mentioned earlier that you said you feel like here in the West, we have to put on this facade and we have to put on this show. Obviously you grew up in, a family that coming over from India, so you had that Indian influence,
Mhm.
but then you also, lived in
Mhm.
the Bay Area.
Mhm.
What did you see? Maybe just like tell me a little bit about like what are the differences you saw like culturally in
Mhm.
the men that you kind of grew up around.
So, I mean, one of the things I do appreciate about my dad was that when he was praying, he was genuine,
Mm,
right? I mean, he was authentic. And during prayer, and if it was at a serious, he would be crying and praying.
mm,
And I'm like, you know, like, I think we're so used to like real men don't cry,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But then when you are actually before God and there's a struggle,
yeah,
because my parents, when they immigrated, they had a lot of struggles, coming in here with hardly much. We were like
sure,
6 people in like a 2-bedroom apartment. My dad used to go downtown San Francisco and work there, come home late at night. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. So, it's like scrapping together all the money they can so they can, pay the rent and stuff
yeah,
like that. Right. And there were times where he would just be crying and praying, like,
mm,
and it was like, it was kind of like, I kind of, in some ways, like, why is he crying?
yeah,
It's like,
yeah. As a kid,
as a kid, right?
were you like, did you think it was unmanly as a kid?
I just, I don't know if I thought it was unmanly. I just thought it was weird. So it's like my dad, he's crying and he's praying.
Yeah,
So I think in one sense, like, okay, he's crying before God. Okay, so
yeah,
that's cool.
yep,
But then he's a man and he's crying and he's my dad. So that's
right.
not so cool. So it's just kind of like
You didn't quite know what to do with
I
that.
didn't know what to do that. Yeah.
And you being a dad
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
like what are reflecting on that?
Yeah.
How do you feel now about that?
I think that's what I would go back to. He was authentic. He was real. He's like, when he was struggling and he was like crying out to God, like, we need help. It was real. I mean, so I think I look back at it as like, he was just authentic. Like if it was
Yeah,
a struggle, he was not trying to put a fake facade out there and saying, yeah, we got this and I
yeah,
can do this. And I think we have a sense of this, rugged individualism, right? It's like,
mm,
I'm going to pull myself up by the bootstraps and I'm going to do this thing and I can make it. But, it's like at the end of the day, we need God,
sure,
so,
yeah, absolutely,
yeah. So I think in the sense of what is a true man, it's like somebody that that loves God and devoted to God
mm,
and is authentic before God. I think, yeah.
right. Huh? What if you had to list like if you had to list qualities about like
Mhm.
masculinity or men,
Yeah.
and maybe contrast that with maybe qualities of that your
Mhm.
observations that you've seen in women.
Mhm.
What would you say? Where would you say men are different?
I think that men tend to be less emotional, I
Okay.
think, right? So, but I think that we need to not shut out the emotion, um, because I think that it allows us to really be real.
Mm,
Because if we shut things out, it's not being real. We're literally closing doors and saying people don't come inside,
yeah.
right? But if we open it up, and I think that it allows people to then actually get close to you because they're like, you know what, Tim's real. I mean, Sam's real and
Yeah.
Mike's real. Like these are not fake individuals.
Yeah.
Like they have their good days, they have their bad days, just like I do.
Yeah.
They struggle in areas, I struggle in areas. They're great in some areas,
Yeah.
I'm great in some areas. So it's like, I think being, like I said, I think goes back to being authentic and real and
Yeah.
like, don't fake it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. When you say authentic and real,
mhm.
obviously we're not talking about, like flesh and blood. We're
Yeah.
talking about being, I don't know, how would you define that?
I would define authentic and real as, how should I define that? Like talking about, like if you're going through a struggle, talking about it.
Mm,
If you're having a great day, talking about it, and
right.
like it's almost like you're not a hypocrite. You're not. There's not two different phases to who you are. You are the real, authentic you, whether you are in private or whether you're in public. That's I think where, if you're authentic, it's
Yeah.
like it's not like two separate people. You're like the real deal.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think that probably takes some courage to do too, right? Like
Yeah.
when I think about being authentic in front of people, that seems somewhat scary to me.
Yeah.
You know, at times,
Yeah.
like I think there are parts of me that I'm interested. I'm fine with showing,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm fine with showing. Like we're all fine with showing our
Yeah.
good stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
right? We're all fine putting our strengths, putting those out there.
Yeah.
But then I think about like, well, what does it mean when I am going through a struggle
Yeah.
to authentically
Mhm.
like live through that and
Yeah.
and show that in a way that is still true to who I
Mhm.
am, because I think, I don't know, me personally, I don't want to be perceived as weak, right? And so for me,
Mhm.
I think sometimes my struggle is how do I not put like a happy spin on whatever I'm going
Yeah.
through, um and yet not appear weak.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So maybe that's a good question to ask. Why are we so hung up and not appearing to be weak, right? Because if you look
Yeah.
at the Apostle Paul, he says, "In my weakness, Christ is magnified," right?
Mhm.
So in my weakness, his strength is more evident.
Yeah.
So in some ways, again, I think maybe we have bought into the worldly thought process of you've got to be macho, you got to be strong.
Sure.
You can do it on yourself. And if you are in a good relationship with God, weaknesses becomes his opportunity to show his strength in you,
Sure.
right? So I think again, it's a struggle we face because we don't want to appear to be weak,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's about we and I, as opposed to like,
Sure.
hey, we're servants of God, right? So it's not about who we are, how we feel, if we feel weak or strong. At the end of the day, we have to rely on God's strength, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, I think, yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, I guess I haven't conceptualized it like that, right?
Yeah.
Like I think there's a lot of times where, yeah, I mean, personally, like, what
Mhm.
I'm going through right now. And, yeah, there's just times where I don't really know what to say.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like say, yeah, life sucks right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, there are people that I can say
Sure.
that to, but like, if I met you in a coffee shop just
Mhm.
randomly, and I don't know that I would feel comfortable saying that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And obviously there's discretion, right? You're
Sure.
not going to just spill your life story
Mhm.
and all the gory details in front of people, but
Right.
no, that's a good reminder for me. Yeah. Sam, I guess as we were talking, another question I had is, obviously faith is a key component for you and I,
Absolutely.
right? And Mike and
Mhm.
Matt, even
Mhm.
who's not here tonight. But what would you tell our, like, our friends and brothers and who are not believers, right?
Yeah.
Um obviously, I think I know your first answer is like, well, God's your answer, number
Yeah.
one, right?
Right.
But what would you tell like them about, like not being weak or being authentic rather?
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like?
I think there is, what I would say is like, there's such freedom in being authentic and real, because when you're authentic, there's no hypocrisy involved, right? You are the real deal.
Mm-hmm.
Truth, you never have to explain truth. It is truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that for those who do not follow God or are not believers in Christ, I think the freedom that comes from just being genuine, it's just, I think it's liberating,
Mm-hmm.
because then you don't have various stories of your life
Yeah.
that you have to pitch to different people.
Yeah.
You are who you are.
Yeah.
So, but I think honestly, having a relationship with God through Jesus Christ is the most amazing thing that you and I could ever experience.
Yeah.
And so if as men, we don't come to grips with that or understand who Jesus is and what he can do in our lives, I think
Mhm.
we're missing it.
Yeah.
A massive, massive thing, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would say that to those who do not follow Christ and do not know his saving salvation in their lives, that being weak can be viewed differently, because it gives also people an opportunity to get part of your life, to be a support, to be a help,
Mm.
right? Those things, because, like we talk about community, we need community. We can't
Yeah.
do stuff on our own,
Yeah.
and if you think about it logically, every part of your life, somebody helped you get there. It took a community.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we shut community out and the people around us, we're the ones that are hurting.
Yeah.
So I think when we open ourselves and be vulnerable, other people can come to our rescue, if you will, and help and support. And we can do the same thing. And now you're starting to build true, genuine, authentic relationships, because it's like, hey, Tim came when I needed it. Sam came when I needed help.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're building those relationships that can be helpful.
That's I hadn't thought about it like that. Like, being vulnerable really does allow you to receive support. And I know as a guy, I appreciate it from other men. I think that, we were built in communities. I mean, we've lived in communities forever.
Yeah.
Right. And, one of the big things that I like to talk about is, men now, like our communities now, especially in the West, are a bunch of men.
I'm going to take a sip.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's fine, very fine water.
Wonderful.
It's the best.
Exceptional.
It is. Yep.
The ice adds little.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Mwah.
Yeah.
But it's in the West here, we have this, you mentioned earlier, we have this like rugged individualism, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to do it on my own. And that's how we like raise our kids.
Yep.
We raise them up in this like, well, I'm going to teach you some stuff, but like, you got to figure it out.
Right.
And that's really counter to what has been done for, thousands of years.
Yeah.
However long we've been in existence, like that's what's been done. Yeah. And to your point about community, like that's where being vulnerable is a key to having a good community.
Well, think about it. Our natural inclination for most human beings, if you see someone struggling or falling, you want to help, but it's like, so there's two parts. One is when we do not show our weakness, there is no opportunity to get help.
Yeah.
And secondly, there's also no opportunity for the other person to provide help and also feel good about it. Right. Yeah. So, we damage ourselves and our society when we are always presenting ourselves as having the answers, knowing what to do, and not being vulnerable. And then if you look at life as a team sport, if you're a football player, you can't do it all yourself.
Sure.
Right. And I think a lot of us try to do life by ourselves when in fact it needs to be like, hey, I'm good in this area, but I need help in this area. Right.
Yeah.
And then collaborative. Imagine how much more we can accomplish as a group.
Yeah.
As opposed to individually.
How much do you think that the breakdown in community and the lack of community support has, how much do you think that's influenced where we're at in current society where we are struggling even to like identify what a woman is, or, like we don't even want to, identify a difference between genders. Like, do you think that in part because we don't have community that's impacting that?
Well, I think that, you talked about earlier when people are divided, it's easier to kind of like have them at one another. And I think it's the old adage of, politicians, it's divide and conquer, right? So once you're divided, you're no longer connected, then you're vulnerable to all the ideologies that do not ground you to real people, right? So you see it on TV, you see it on social media, and you start believing that. But then you actually meet Tim in real life. It's like, hey, wait a minute, I am not who they think they say I am, right?
Right.
So I think that screen time has taken away the real interactions that we can have with one another.
Yeah.
And so that it grounds you. Meeting somebody in person grounds you to reality as opposed to a screen or a TV, and where your mind is easily manipulated. It's hard to, for example, just take an example, like it's easy to be like a keyboard warrior anonymously, just slamming different people and different things. But in front of Tim, I'm like, I can't slam him. I mean, it's like,
sure.
It's harder to do that in person. So there's a lot of behavior that's modified when you're starting to be in front of people, which starts then tempering people's views, the way they react to people, because it's like, it's a real guy. It's like, Tim, I know Jenna, I know the kids, right? It's like, I'm not going to be on there just,
sure,
saying that he's, bigger than I am. And I hate it for that, Like,
Yeah. No, and that's a good point. I think, I don't know, as I'm trying to like get a better understanding of the landscape, and I think one of the things our hope to do with this show is really start genuine conversations around genuine masculinity. But I think in order to do that, we have to peel back like some of the lies,
Right.
right? And we have to kind of peel back like, oh, well, this isn't really how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
I'm thinking like, for example, the men's group we have on that you got at the house on Saturday. I think that's the start of creating like real men.
Okay.
Because as you know, in our group, we talk about real stuff, the different struggles people are going through, the different challenges. It's almost like the mask is removed. Like I can sit here and I can talk about the different things I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
And you start creating, in my view, starting to create real men who are codependent on each other, realize the need for others, and also realize the responsibility to help one another, right? So I think that if men can start getting together as men, I think like back in the old days, right? If you had a farm, like a bunch of people would come, like whatever. So you'd work collaborative. There were real people working together.
Yeah.
And I think if we can start doing that more regularly, I think it would start to bring that authentic, real people and men.
Mm-hmm.
And then all this confusion starts disappearing.
Well, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, although, I mean, I guess you could argue like, well, what if you surround yourself with a bunch of bad guys, right?
Yeah.
Like what is it? Bad company corrects good morals.
Yes.
And so, man, how do you go about like choosing guys that you put in your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, just like you, I think, first of all, if we identify as Christians, believers in Jesus Christ, and then we find like-minded other believers as well, right? So I think part of it is, you also heard this, if you want to fly with eagles, don't hang out with turkeys, right?
Yeah.
So if we are believers in Christ, find more godly men and women that you can associate with, hang out with.
Yeah.
And that's not to the exclusion of not reaching out to worldly people. Obviously, we're in the world, not of the world.
Yep.
But the more we surround ourselves, again, I look at life as a team sport. And if I'm playing football, I'm going to hang around with football players.
Sure.
Right? So if I want to be more like Christ, I'm going to hang out with more Christian men.
Sure.
Right? And then so I can learn more, I can be more impactful.
Yeah.
And so it's like a real purposeful decision saying, I want to hang out with Christian men.
Yeah.
Because we do Christ together. We are a living body of Christ working together. So I think from my perspective, I'm intentional about meeting more Christian men to hang out with, because then we start helping one another. We, like Tim talks about, which is, we spur one another on to love and good work. So,
no, that's good. And oh, excuse me.
Yeah. I choked you up.
You got me, man.
Yeah.
That was
deep.
No, what I hear you saying, and I'm part of what we want to do is we want to hopefully help people like apply this practically, right? So what I hear you saying is what you do is you find people who are either going in the same direction as you, have a similar outset or mindset as you, or people who you want to be like.
Right.
And those are the people that you put in your life.
I think that you would describe that correctly. And, the proverb says, how can two walk together unless they're agreed or aligned, right? So I'm very intentional about finding people that are aligned with me as a believer.
Yep.
Aligned with me in terms of building community.
Yep.
Aligned with me in terms of loving people.
Yeah.
Connecting people. Those are the people I try to align myself with. Because my thing has always been focus on your strengths.
Yeah.
As opposed to try to work on your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes if you're like, using maybe baseball as an analogy, if you're good at pitching, focus on pitching, right? Yep. Not on batting and catching and all the rest of that, right?
Yep.
So it's like for me, like those are my key things.
Yeah.
People that love God.
Yep.
People that love people.
Yep.
People that love connecting. People that are business owners and entrepreneurs. I love that creativity. So I surround myself with those type of people because for me it energizes me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that because, I mean, obviously, there's the faith component, which is huge.
Yeah.
But then also you listed off some things that are not part of that necessarily, right? And what I love about that is I think my hope is that I hear that and I hope other people hear that and they're like, oh, there are some things that are really important to me,
right?
That other people apparently share.
Yep.
I think it's so easy for us to, and it goes to being connected in the community. It's so easy for us to go, I'm the only one that thinks this way. Right. I am the only person that is struggling with this or has these thoughts or who's interested in this, right? And once you start out getting out, meeting people and building a community, you're like, oh, all of a sudden you find all these other people who have the exact same interests as you, who have the same priorities. And I mean, to your point, you build momentum in that way, right? You essentially create a wave of energy moving in one direction, two guys moving in the same direction, agreed on the same things. I think that's good. I hadn't quite thought through it that way before, but because I think a lot of times, personally, I've always like, well, at least when I was younger, it was always like, well, I like you, so cool, let's hang out,
right?
Without regard necessarily of what their priorities were, or what they wanted to do in life or whatever. And as I've gotten older, I think I've been much more intentional about my friends. Much more, and I'm still friendly with lots of people, right? And I still care about people, but like also I try to align myself, like you said, like with people who share the same values I have. And the cool thing about that is that's not dependent on necessarily geography. That's not necessarily dependent on even religion. You know what I mean? Or, profession or any of that stuff. I mean, it really gets down to a deeper level of connection.
Yeah. I look at life and people as like, I know that I have things in common. I just come with the perspective, like no matter where they're from, they can be from Timbuktu or Zambia or wherever, I will have something in common. And so I always try to look for that common thread that I can start connecting around, because once I connect around that, then it opens up other areas I'm also connected with, right? So but I think we become so narrow-minded based on what we perceive and hear from social media and the news that, if you're red or blue, you have nothing in common. If you're Republican, Democrat, if you believe in this or that, there's nothing in common. But actually the opposite is true. Those are extremes that are focused on, but if you come into life with a perspective of, I have things in common with you, and look for those, intentionally look for where those things are common, build on that common thing, and then grow from there. Right. And then you're going to start finding, wow, I share this in common, that in common, this, and all of a sudden those differences start falling away. And then you start building again, real relationships.
No, I love that. It makes me think of like, I years ago, I intentionally started using the term brother. Right. I got made fun of a bunch because like people were like, who is it? Is it Hulk Hogan who does brother?
Yes. It's Hulk
Hogan. But I intentionally started using it because it occurred to me, like, we're all guys. Therefore, at some point, you are my brother. You know what I mean? And when you start viewing people that way, I think it really changes how you interact with them. Because you start seeing them as important, having value, and you're connected to them. So I don't know, man. I really appreciate that though. We have so much more in common. And when you're looking for things in common, you're looking for the good.
Absolutely. Yes.
You're not looking at like, oh, this is why you're terrible, or this is why you're bad, or this is why you're evil. You're looking for the good things.
Right. And even if you look at it from just a natural perspective, you can find something to compliment somebody on, right? It doesn't matter what background they are. You might not be attracted to them in any way, but it's like, man, nice socks, right? That opens up a conversation.
It does.
I literally do that almost everywhere I go, which is like, I point out something and I say, hey, that's nice. And first of all, it makes them feel good.
It does.
Opens up an opportunity to have a conversation. And you start building from there, right? So it's always like whenever you go, I mean, but you got to be authentic about it. I mean, if you hate those socks, like, man, those socks suck. You don't want to do that, right? But it was like, man, that's cool, right? Like today I saw your shirt. I'm like, dude, that is a nice shirt, right? But if you can, every single day, everyone you meet, start with a compliment, which is super easy. There's always something you can like. Their shoes, their clothing, their hair.
Do you know what that is?
No, I kind of forgot. But you know what? I see yours and I'm like, oh, I remember that.
No making fun of people who don't have hair, right? Like this is...
you can't.
Sorry.
Didn't we just talk about finding things to help?
Sorry, I'm not allowed to make fun of the follically challenged.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
One thing I like about it too, just sitting back here thinking about it, is even if you disagree with somebody and you're trying to think of something positive to say about them, even if it's as superfluous as like nice socks, Tim.
Yeah.
I like that it starts engaging a positive aspect of your mind. So it's not necessarily like I'm going to give you a compliment.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
It's I'm going to start thinking in a positive mentality in this situation, and that will be associated to this person. So then it's not it. Like you said, everything isn't negative about this. It's not us butting heads and fighting. It's
And you make a good point. And that's so I want to start off with a positive, good feeling vibe, right?
Yeah.
And you can never do that by saying you suck, right? Which you've said to me before, Tim.
Well, sometimes you do, Sam. I'm just saying.
I know. But but if you eat like even in the line, like when we were standing in a line at a certain coffee shop that we hang out at, right? It's like I'm always able to find one or two things about somebody that I can just open up and say, hey, love that tie, or love those earrings, or whatever it is. And all of a sudden it puts a smile on their face.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now they're engaged.
Yeah.
Right. And you have this positive energy that you're building between the two. And now the line that, the 20 people in line feel like it's just two people because all of a sudden you're just interacting. So
You are clearly an introvert, Sam.
No, I struggle with that many times. Yes.
No, but I do, what you're talking about though, even if, so like I know plenty of people who are very, very introverted and aren't comfortable talking to
me,
Mike,
really?
not comfortable talking to people, just randomly. Right. But the interesting thing is if you use this as a mental exercise, right?
Absolutely.
It changes your perspective. Even if you're standing in line and you're not talking to anybody, but you look around and you look at the person in front of you and you go, hey man, like that's a cool shirt.
Yep.
Like it changes how like the energy you put out, right? But then also it changes how like you could possibly interact with them. Yeah. Right. You're automatically coming from a better place.
Exactly. I mean, there's a person that has beautiful fingernails that they do. And I'm like, I love that. And like, oh man, right? And it just, again, it brightens the environment. Yep. It brightens their feeling. Yep. It makes me feel good that I'm helping somebody. And just, I think it's like if you go intentionally out there to do good, I think you will find opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Literally every single day. And even for an introvert, it's a simple thing as like, I think if we go with a mindset of like, if I'm at the grocery store, if I'm at the coffee shop, the person at the cashier, right, the register, find something about them that you can compliment. Yeah. Right. And just and watch. It just changes like, oh, thank you.
I was gonna say, just thinking about that. Sorry, I switched my camera early. Yeah. Camera problems, a bingo card. Like I'm kind of like visualizing this as you're talking about it. And one thing we've talked about before with other guys is one of the roles of men and
you mean
being
there have
masculine.
been other guys than me here?
You're not our first, Sam.
This is a hard conversation.
Sorry.
It's a hard. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't want you to find out. Like
I didn't mean to talk to you about this, Sam.
I mean, one of the roles is it's leadership, and one of the ways we talk about leading is by being that threw me off so much. Being like a servant in leaderhood, right? Or leading through service, right?
Yep.
And I was just kind of like extending the thought process of everything you were just saying, of being positive mindset, and like how can I then see this? It really does help put you back into that also servant mindhood, because then you're trying to think about that person and like maybe where they're at emotionally, what made them make this decision to wear those socks or do whatever it is. And so you can start kind of even thinking deeper about it and like, okay, what could they possibly need right now? How can I help them? How can I serve them? And like, it's a small step towards that, but I can definitely see how it could snowball and cascade into being more cognizant and aware of other people.
And I think you make a good point about the servant leader part. Think about it. When you are taking the action, you're leading.
Oh man.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like you're taking the action to do something positive and good. You're the leader. In some ways, you're like lifting somebody up and saying, hey, I appreciate whatever about that person you might be saying. All of a sudden, you're lead, and then it's a response, and then they follow, right? And then a positive feedback comes back, and then now you start engaging in a positive way, and it changes the whole environment, right? And I think that's where a lot of us, we go in with these preconceived notions of people. I know Matthew in our group, like, oh, Sam and his San Francisco ways, right? And the liberal ways and stuff, right? Preconceived notions, right? But it happens a lot of times. But I think if we just disregard preconceived notions, have an open mind, and go in every single day, say, every person I come across, I'm going to compliment them on something. It's super simple. You're actually a leader. You're taking charge of a certain situation, doing something, and then you can see how things snowballs from there.
Man, I'm really not good at this here. Hold on a second. There we go. I'm not good at
There
cameras.
he is.
I am moving
we can,
immensely.
we can see you, Mike. We found you.
Well, I like how it's going because I'm just kind of like trying to follow down this. We're talking about leadership and all this, and especially you brought up how people kind of like see politics, right? And I'm like, it's amazing that if you look at good leaders, one of the rules, and you've said it many times, because I think even your application, your software is designed around creating community, right? Like we want to create unity and community by finding commonalities and things. And it's really sad that the quote unquote leaders we see nowadays are more focused on division than unification. And that is something you definitely see in strong leaders and strong men is they know how to take a ragtag bunch of misfits essentially and then bring them together, right? Like that's the whole thing. Like, so I think that's an interesting aspect of masculinity is the ability to find the unifying thread through a diverse group and then make sure everyone brings together and creates a community out of a group that would otherwise be, at odds.
Right.
So I think that's interesting.
Well, and you said it and it just blew my mind. It's like you taking the initiative to compliment somebody is you being a leader.
Right.
Because I think that blows my mind because I think that oftentimes when I think of a leader, I think of somebody standing up in front of a bunch of people, either giving a speech or telling people what to do, or hey guys, this is what the plan is, or like this very like standout moment, right? Like that's what I think of leadership sometimes. And what you're talking about though, that's an everyday application. Right. Like that's literally that's a way that you can lead in your community every single day.
And it's something that as you practice it every single day, it becomes who you are. And you become a force for good everywhere you go. If you think about what Christ did, he came into the world, right? For God so loved the world that he did something, right? And if we as men start going out and genuinely compliment, because look, you're going to like something about somebody. You just are, right? From, their socks or their hair or their, whatever they might be wearing. And especially for girls, it's easy to compliment a woman. They might have some earrings or this or that, whatever it is. It's just like, oh, that looks great. Right. And again, what I look at is like, and I'm glad you brought that out about the leader thing, because that really actually is what it is. You're a leader. You're a man that's coming into the world, into the space that you are, and you're leading by example. Hey, I am going to say something good about you. I am going to compliment you on something. And then guess what? They follow. Right?
Yeah.
And leaders want. So imagine if you have people that you associate with, you're complimenting them. You're telling them that they're good in certain parts, areas, or whatever else.
Yeah.
Guess what? When you need something, they will follow you. Hey, you know what? You need something, they'll be there because you're leading by example. You're being a force for good. And I think that's what's missing so much because I think men were like, oh, well, I don't want to say anything, right? I mean, I compliment men, women, old, young. It doesn't matter.
It's true. I've seen him do it.
Right?
It's disgusting.
It makes him nervous. Like, oh, what's he going to say next? It does make my son nervous. Like, what's my dad going to say?
Son's an introvert, though.
I mean, how do you do that to guys without being awkward? Like, you obviously didn't skip leg day. Very nice. Like,
you know what? Yeah.
I don't think I got
honestly
that
though, it's fun to make it a joke, right? But also, like, it also is. It's a bit of a skill, but it's like a muscle, right? Like as you use it, you will be surprised.
I feel like we're gonna get down this thing. Like, how there's always the pickup line conversation. We're gonna go down to this thread of like, what are the best guy compliments you can give to each other? Because that's
what the best guy compliments I usually give is like clothing. Dude, that's a nice shirt. Those are nice shoes, right?
That's true.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah. And that's easy. And it's like, and then they start talking about it. Oh, I got this at blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, thanks, man. Whatever, right? So,
No, that's good. And I love the idea of pointing out positive things about people, because I think part of it is we have been sold this lie that we're different than everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. And not to say that we're not unique,
Correct. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or that we don't have things
I know
that,
we look pretty much like twins, but there's
basically,
certain differences.
People
yeah.
do mistake us often.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
But he's the older one, if you guys are wondering.
Yeah. Right.
But no, honestly, like it's man, we've been told like you're different than everybody else. But the truth is you're connected to everybody else.
That's it. Right. You may be different, but you're connected.
Yeah.
In some way or fashion, you're connected.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that's, if we can focus on that connection, and if we can focus on going out there and every single day, being a force for good and a force for bringing people together and common, I think, honestly, I think if we men as intentionally go out there and say, you know what, every person I'm going to find something to compliment them, like even say hi or whatever, right? So it's like, you can find something, even to the point like, hey, thanks for opening that door, right? Yeah. There's things you can compliment people on, and you will literally find, once you start your eyes open to it, you're like, oh my gosh, I missed all of these opportunities to be a force for good and be positive.
Yeah. Because
it comes back to you. When you're positive, it feeds you as well.
Yeah. So. And that's true. I'm gonna use a more manly term than compliment. Okay.
Okay. Clearly, you have issues. No.
I mean, no. It makes me think of like you're not only you're complimenting people, but what are you doing? You're building them up.
There you go. Yeah.
Like that's to me when I think of guys, like I think of building stuff, right? Yeah. And so if we're looking at it as a leader, as we're as looking at it as how do we operate as men in the community. We should be building people up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. We should be looking for opportunities to lift people up and encourage them. Yeah. Right. Man, it's really hard to watch company cultures where people are stifled and they're not appreciated and they're asked to do really hard work and yet shown no gratitude for it. It's I've been in a ton of those, and it's really sad. And it's amazing how little it takes to change that. Right. As far as like how they feel. Right. In one of the old hospitals I worked at, I was the director over business development. And so my team was all external focused, right? So we're going out into the community and we're talking to providers and we're trying to get them to refer. But as the director, I wasn't as much like, in the field as everybody else was. And part of being the director is as at the hospital, I was attending meetings and all that stuff. But one of the things, and this isn't, I'm not trying to say this as a, hey, look what great thing I did. Just an example that I saw. It was acute psychiatric care. So it's a very, very difficult and challenging job to begin with. And then, these are for facilities.
Why do you describe it that way?
What do you mean?
Like acute.
You want me to like say more
manly term?
What's more masculine way of describing
masculine. You were saying you were going to go more masculine.
Extreme.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Yeah. But extreme psychiatric care. That's what it was.
There was.
That sounds way worse than what it is now. I don't think we want to be in that world.
No, it was not extreme psychiatric care, guys. It's called acute, ACUTE. Got it. Look it up if you don't know what it means.
Two different words.
There are
one word.
Yeah, no, there's no space in between.
Got it. Okay.
Right. But so we had case managers, and their job was to basically do I wouldn't call it quite therapy, but like they would meet with the patients and they would kind of talk through them about their life. They would talk to them about what resources they had. The things that led them to where they were, what it was going to look like going forward, helping them create a plan for after they were discharged. And so these case managers were tasked with taking care of 12 to 15 people a person, or each case manager, right? And that doesn't sound like a lot, except for the fact that these patients rotate out every 3 to 7 days.
Wow.
So you're starting this process anew with a new patient, with a new history, with a new background, with new challenges every 3 to 7 days. Okay. And there's extreme pressure to do this in an efficient way. there's a bunch of regulation that kind of surrounds that, right? They have to have a certain appointments scheduled before they leave, before they discharge. And so this is a very, very high pressure job. And so one of the things that I started doing was, because I was at the hospital and because I wasn't out in the community, I would start just like randomly stopping by and bringing them cookies, or bringing them, like, just stopping and talking to them for 15, 20 minutes. It might be a vent session from them. I might not say anything and they might tell me how terrible things are, but I would do that regularly. And when I left, after I left, I kept getting reached out to by people saying, come back, we miss you. Right. And I,
it was the donuts you brought.
It was they missed the donuts.
Yeah.
But no, I just use it as an example of something that I saw. And again, I wasn't trying to do anything crazy, right? I wasn't trying to get anything from them, other than my goal was to go in there and try to help them have a better day.
Right.
Because I knew that their job was really hard.
Right.
And it made me, it hurt me to know that they weren't appreciated the way that they should be appreciated. And so for me, I wanted to change that, because my hope wherever I work is that we create a culture where people want to come to work. Yeah. Right. So I don't know. Sorry, I kind of went down a rabbit trail there.
You did go down a rabbit trail, but it's you went down a cute trail.
For me, that was like a real life example of where I saw that actually impact people.
I think the building up is a good way to describe it. Yeah. Because you're going intentionally to build people, to encourage people, to spur people on to do good things, right? And so as a man, you're like, maybe the way you look at it as a man is like, I want to build things, right? I want to build people up. And our pastor back in the Bay Area was talking about how our current generation, they're used to tearing things down. They don't know how to build. Oh, yeah. And what if men and women of God come into this environment and says, I'm going to build people. I'm going to build things. I'm going to tear it down. Because that's what our current, this division, it's about tearing down. Yeah. Right? It's tearing down families. Yeah. It's tearing down cultures. It's tearing down cities. You know what? But they don't know how to put it back together. You're right. And that's where we as men of God who are filled with the Spirit of God can come into the, like, I'm going to build people. I'm not going to tear things down. The world is doing a great job of tearing things down, right? Yeah. That's not what my role is. I'm here to build people up, to encourage people, to compliment people, and think about the difference you can start creating. It's like everywhere you go, again, not to pat myself like you did. I'm going to pat myself too.
My arm, my shoulder.
Yeah, your shirt hurts. So let me do my turn. But there's this one coffee shop, right, that we go to. Like just last couple of weeks, like two of those, like, Sam, we so appreciate you here. And I'm like, that's, it's like, and I return that compliment to them. Sorry, not the mic out here. But people start recognizing, hey, that person builds me up. That person encourages me, right? You're looking for that person when they come in, because it's almost like if you're having a bad day, it's like, oh, Tim's coming in, I'm going to feel good, which is what I do. I saw you walking in, and I'm like, oh, Tim's here, right? Yep. And it's an encouraging, and all of a sudden your perspective changes, your view changes, and now you have this great energy. So, I mean, if you're talking about masculinity, it's this authentic, real person that is going out to build things. When God created the garden, he told man to go out and tend to take care of it, to build it and all that. It's not tearing it down. So I think if we go intentionally out there, I'm going to build people, I'm going to go compliment people, right? I think it changes us and it changes the people around us.
Yeah. Go ahead. No.
That made me think, because there's always this term out there now, like toxic masculinity has been a thing. And that's one reason why society likes to break men down. They're like, men are worthless, men are terrible.
Yeah.
I'm like, I like the way you just described it too, because you're describing how previous generations or other people are breaking down. They're just breaking. They know how to break things down. They know how to build things up.
Correct.
And so it's almost like, you can use your other masculine traits, or you can be a male and a man,
right,
and break things down. That's what I feel like we see a lot of like insecure men do. A lot of like fake leaders doing. Right. A lot of people are trying to be a man's man.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're right. The real men are the ones who are comfortable enough in themselves and confident enough to be like, work on building up everything around them. I think that's just an interesting, especially like in society nowadays, we see, like you said, if you could be the guy that walks in and people are like, Awesome.
Exactly.
Sam is here.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, if that's all I could
Yeah.
ever bring to somebody's day,
Yeah.
that's a huge
Huge.
win.
Right.
And so yeah, I just thinking through current culture and how
Right.
how everyone's
Yeah.
viewing masculinity and how most guys are portraying it online and,
Yeah.
and all this kind of stuff.
So
I think it's really refreshing to hear that.
right, and if you look at it, for example, if you look at society as a my background is real estate, as a tear down home, right? So you can take a sledgehammer to it, or you could say, you know what, let me put new sheetrock on, let me put new paint on, right? I think that's the perspective we need to go into society with every single day. Let me put new paint, let me put new shelves, let me put, mow the lawn out here, as opposed to let me just tear this house down, right?
Yeah.
I think all of a sudden the neighborhood starts becoming better because you're going and fixing everybody's things, right? You're mowing the lawn, you're fixing. All of a sudden they start feeling good. Then they start taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
And you can see how this can start cascading around society by being men that are in this toxic masculinity. Yeah, it's a very self-centered, toxic masculinity. It's not a real man, right? It's just a facade of a man. And that's what I'm saying. If we're authentic, men build things. They don't tear things down. And imagine if we can go into this world to build people up, to build society, not tear it down.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean about focusing on commonality, because it's almost like Legos, right? If there's all these pieces, you stick them together, you bring in, and all of a sudden it starts looking like something, as opposed to right now, they're just taking these, throwing it all over the place. So,
Yeah. No, I like that, man. I think oftentimes it's really easy, I think for men especially, to really tap into that destructive component, right? Like I think, and I do think that we have the capacity to destroy for a reason, right? Like I think we need to have that capacity. But that capacity, the end of that capacity is not for destruction.
Yeah.
The end of that capacity is for
build.
rebuilding.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For building something better.
Right.
And I'm guilty of not operating that way. There's a lot of times, even with my family, like
Dude, I'm guilty on that.
yeah, man, I just go in and I'm like, I'm going to destroy, I'm going to wreck this.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it doesn't work out well.
No,
it's as strange as that sounds. It just doesn't go
I know,
well
Mike,
for
you
me.
don't have that problem.
No,
it's like
no.
you're always building up, and
Well,
it's like, yeah.
in my I point over
In
here
your
because my
corner.
wife's over there. I was going to say, like, actually, my family, that's actually an accurate statement. I feel very good there. But in my world, it's more of work. Like Tim mentioned, workplace things.
Right.
I'm a software engineer. We have code reviews. We have all sorts of crap. So there's plenty of times for somebody to criticize my work.
Yeah.
The number of times I have to seriously sit back and be like, okay, this person's not attacking me. I'm trying to get better. We're all in the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Or even the other way around. Like, I don't need to obliterate this person.
Correct.
Their
Yeah.
viewpoint. Like,
Right.
it is funny because you guys mention all these things, and I'm like, yeah, if I want the team to win, like the company to do better,
Right.
I have to have this viewpoint of like, you're trying to build me up and I'm trying to build
Right.
you up. That's the goal. I'm not trying to get
Exactly.
ahead of you in some sort of like, race to the top of this fake ladder. It's
Right. Yeah.
And so,
And
think it's really
unfortunately,
important.
you do have people who are operating that way.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what, though? I bet you if you operate in good faith and build them up. Now, granted, you're not going to fix them, right?
no, but you do
you're-
get a lot of reciprocating, like in that.
Correct.
Yeah. Man, that's good.
And for me, like you were talking about, the challenge is sometimes at home, right? It's because like you can compliment people out there, but it's like then you have to live with your wife and your kid, right? And all of a sudden it's not as good. And so
Are you taking notes over there off screen? We're
see,
good?
that's
Okay.
what exactly what she's doing. But it's like, I think from my perspective, I need to also at home make a more dedicated or focused or like, I'm going to do the same thing at home as well. Because sometimes, honestly, like if my wife is telling me, oh, you should have done this better, I'm like, why are you tearing me down? Like, right? It's like,
Why are you attacking me?
Why are you attacking me? As opposed to like, actually, she wants you to also win because you're a family, right? And so,
Man.
and that's been hitting home to me recently. So it's like, okay, I don't have to be so defensive when she tells me like, maybe you shouldn't do this and maybe you should do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think again, it all goes down to, again, we're all always learning and growing.
Yeah.
This is something that I'm growing in. I'm good externally. I struggle sometimes at home, honestly, right? So it's like, okay, I've got to also compliment my wife on how well she keeps the house organized or things like that, or my son and how, he's a really smart kid and all this guy, right? So it's like, I've got to starting at home out, right? And again, each one of them, we all have our different challenges, but I think
Yeah.
then that's becoming the leader. And that's becoming the leader at home. That's becoming the leader outside.
Well, shoot. And if you can do it at home, you can probably do it everywhere.
Yeah.
I got a question kind of leading from that. Like,
Yeah.
where we're talking about like starting at home, and you
Yeah.
mentioned you have a son.
Yeah.
Like kind of going more big picture
Mhm.
than not just on compliments, but like,
Yeah.
how do you lead your son and prepare him then to be
Mm.
like the next man in the line, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you hand off that baton? Like, what does that look like to you?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it has to be, I think it's by example. I mean, it's not necessarily like do this, this, and this. Because I think like we all follow somebody, right? By what they say and what they do. And so for me, I think it's just leaving that example, I think is how you do it, and not perfect like Tim, but I've struggled in certain areas, right? So I think for my son, that would be the way to pass it on.
Mm.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you think that it is enough just to live the example? Or do you think, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I wonder how much, right? Like, and every kid is different, right? We're all built a little different. I think there are things that, like, personally, that I think there are things about my dad that I think he did really well, right? But man, there's some things that I wish he had told me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, man, because I also think that, and maybe you do this too. Like, there's the whole idea of passing on wisdom, and man, I know that's something that I desperately wanted, especially as a kid and as a young adult, and even now, to be very honest with you, like, I appreciate when older men, and I say older men, and there are some younger men who do this too, but primarily it's older guys because they've been there and they've gone through this, when they speak truth into my life. I imagine you'd probably agree.
Yeah, it's a mix of both, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it depends on the age of the child as well, right? I mean, obviously when they're younger, you can be a lot more like, hey, this is the right way to do it. But I think at the end of the day, they'll look at what we do. And so that actually has more impact.
That's fair.
And I wish I'd done things differently in raising Matthew, right? And it's like, and I know my dad thinks he'd have done differently with me, right? And so on and so forth. But I think the more, and I think that's where, if we have a community of men hanging out regularly, we can like help each other. I mean, the Paul clearly says the older help the younger, both men and women. And it's that wisdom you can pass on. Like, hey, when my kid was this age, I wish it had done this differently, right?
Yep.
I mean, my wife works with our friend at a Montessori school, and she's like, man, there's so much wisdom in how the Montessori method of education works. She's like, if I'd known these things, I'd have done it differently.
Yeah.
Right. And so some of it is just like you worked with what you had. Of
course.
Right. But the more tools you can gather, and the more tools you come by community. You have different people with different skill sets that add to you. And when you're open and vulnerable, they're able to help.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Man, what a resource we cut ourselves off from.
Absolutely.
When we're not in community.
Right.
Man, because there's so much that we can learn and so many things that we can pull from.
Right.
That if we're not in community, we have zero access to.
Yeah.
Right. It'd be like going to school and not having a teacher.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like cutting your feet off and you want to walk. I'm like, no, I mean, it's like there's so much power in collaborative approach of life, because each one can add to it, and and we all get better for it. So
well, and to all those out there who think they did it on their own, I would challenge you.
You didn't build it.
You didn't do it on your own. At some point, there is somebody who helped you. At least one person.
He's looking at you, Mike.
I gotta go change the book I'm writing.
I did it on my own. A Tale by Mike Will.
Yes.
No. Sam, what if there were a couple things that you could maybe pass along to younger men, maybe who are going to listen to this podcast, or or maybe there's wisdom that you share with guys regularly, or anything that you feel like you really like to share, or things that you like to point out?
I think like what I mentioned earlier, like I think as part of, there's two things. from my perspective, if you got to love God
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to love people, I think like when the Pharisees came out, she's like, what is the greatest commandment? Love God.
Yep.
And the second is like it, which is love your neighbor, right?
Yep.
So I think if you operate from that perspective of, I need to love God, I need to love people, I think it starts flowing out of you, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it just becomes a natural extension of who you are.
Yeah.
Because you start caring for people. And again, it goes back to, I think if we as men here start looking at, I need to go build people up. I need to go compliment people. My job is not to tear things down, but to build people up and
Yeah.
things up. I think it can start changing how people and even young men start behaving.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to tear my friend down or my girlfriend or wife down or my parents. I'm
Yeah.
going to build, right? I'm going to build something. And think about as men, especially, when we finish a task, when we build something, it feels great,
It does.
right?
Yep.
But when you tear something down, there's an emptiness in there. So, I mean, it's like if you want, as a young man, if you want to feel accomplished and feel well and feel good, especially with all the mental health crisis going on in our
Yeah.
country,
Yep.
get involved, do something, right? There's a positive energy that comes from just volunteering to do something for others. And I think that as young men, I think if, get involved with community, get involved with people, be vulnerable, build people up, compliment people,
Yeah.
make it who you are. Even if, like I said, even if you're an introvert, you can say, like that tie or like that shirt or those shoes are nice, right? Whatever. You can do that.
Yeah.
And you can start seeing it as, it's like anything in life, you got to practice it and practice. And then it just becomes who you
Yeah.
are. You know, you're one who it's like it talks about Barnabas. He was an encourager, right?
Yeah.
So you just start encouraging people and it just becomes who you are. And guess what? They start encouraging you and it's become this wonderful cycle of
Yep.
supporting and building one another up.
And to your point, though, I mean, I think it should be said that, part of that living authentically, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
You're an extreme extrovert, buddy.
Extreme or acute?
No, well, maybe both.
You're cute. Don't worry
I'm
about it.
acute and
You're acute.
You're extreme.
You're an extremely
Acute.
acute
I'm putting that on a shirt.
person. Extremely acute. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I think that, if people hear this and they're like, well, I'm not an extrovert. I don't want to talk to a whole bunch of people. There are people that you interact with. There are people that you see on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You can practice this with them.
Absolutely.
Even
yeah.
if it's, your mom.
Yeah.
Right. Or
Yeah.
even if it's your one coworker that you see on Zoom once a week because you have that meeting.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it can be, and you want to do it in an authentic way
Yeah.
too. Right.
Yeah.
Because if you do it in an inauthentic manner, it's going to come across that way.
Right.
They're going to be
Exactly.
like, that's not you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Like, for example, like I've used as an example is like colors. I like, there's different colors I like, right? So like, I'm Indian, so we like orange, right? No, just kidding.
That's a thing.
it's all right. It's fine. He's
It's
Indian.
fine.
He can say that.
Yeah, I can say that. Right. Right. So it's like, if I see somebody with orange, I'm like, love that color.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's just harmless. And it's like, even if it's on a Zoom call and you see it on Zoom,
Yep.
maybe it might look like red, but you could, yeah. So, but yeah, it's even like an introvert can do little things and start adding back, start giving, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Unless
And
they're
then-
colorblind.
Then they're colorblind. Then it's like, I love that gray.
Great shade of gray on you.
Yeah, that's a great shade of gray.
amazing shade of gray
Gray,
you have
yeah.
on.
Or is it black? So, yeah.
No, that's good, man. And I, as you're thinking about it, it's like, I guess I just want to take a second to encourage, like, whoever watches this, as a guy, find other guys that you can encourage, find other guys that you can, not only surround yourself with, but like encourage. If you're an older guy and, nobody's quite as old as Sam,
Yeah.
but if you're younger than 300,
Yes.
this
is an inside joke. Yeah. he's like,
sorry guys,
Yeah.
there's been a bunch of that. And
Yeah.
we may have to like go into the
Didn't
notes.
we just talk about encouraging one another?
I'm being
Yeah.
generous.
Yes, okay,
I
yes.
was erring on the young side of 300.
Got it. Okay, got it. Very nice.
But no, honestly, guys, like if there are people that are younger than you, take the time to encourage them, because the generation Gen Z, Gen Alpha, like they're not hearing it. They're not hearing it from society. They're not hearing it from the media. Take the time to even just compliment them.
Yeah.
Small things, because if we can build up the next generations of men, society will improve. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah.
So
And like we have the bricks behind us, right?
Yep.
It's take one brick at a time and you start building, right?
That's right.
That's all it is. It's not complicated. You're not trying to build a cathedral
Yep.
like in a day, right? But you're putting a brick and somebody else puts a brick, and next thing you know, you're building a great edifice, right? I heard this quote from a Wall Street Journal article, and it said, when people feel like they're part of a community, they no longer want to just lay bricks. They want to build cathedrals because there's a higher purpose in a sense of community. It's not, I'm just doing my own thing.
Yeah,
it's like, right?
Yeah.
You're going to build a cathedral because you have things in common.
Yep.
And imagine if we as Americans start building our society together. I mean, we have the best country in the world, but how amazing if we're all united, right?
Yep.
Around the flag, God, whatever, right? We're united in a purpose.
Yep.
And so it's like, stop focusing on division, just start laying bricks. And as more people start doing that, you build a cathedral.
Yeah. Well, Mike, any final thoughts, buddy?
I mean, my final thought would be like, I keep going back to thinking about what current culture and society always sounds like. I watch a lot of YouTube. It's bad.
It's bad.
But
It's
I
not
mean,
TikTok, though, right?
I love.
Is it TikTok?
I'm not on TikTok. No, I don't like
you don't
China
like the
spying on me
Chinese.
that much.
Oh, got it.
I do send them data all the time, but it's
Okay,
not.
okay.
Anyway,
It's very generous
no,
of you.
but
Yeah.
I hear so much on so many different voices, and the big thing for men is like hustle culture or build
Oh, yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
up. It's all about
Yeah.
building you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the focus is always very self-serving almost.
Yeah.
It like, yeah, it starts with you. I'm like, yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
But whenever it talks about building something, it's building up your business, building
Yeah.
up your body, building up your mind. I'm like, I like the outward focus on everyone else. Like
Mhm.
everything you talked about, it's very much servanthood, right?
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
much community building. It's
Yeah.
very much, I was not put here to build up this body. I was
Yes.
put here
Sure.
to build
Tim
up
did that
this
already.
community. Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
so I just love
Yeah.
that take because I think it's definitely advice that's sorely needed
Yeah.
in a lot of culture nowadays, especially when you see so many guys who are like, I can't go start up a multi-million-dollar startup. I'm not going to be,
Yeah.
jacked at 300 pounds and putting up
Right.
bills like crazy.
Right.
But I can be that guy in the
Mhm.
coffee shop that is helping building up people in my day, right? And I can be that guy who's laying a brick
Right.
that might be the foundation for an edifice
Correct.
to come.
Yeah.
So I just like that. I think
No,
that's
that's
really a
good.
good take.
Sam, anything else you would like to say as
No,
we
man,
close, man?
I really appreciate both of you guys and what you're trying to accomplish. I think it is absolutely so needed. So continue the good work.
Yeah.
I think we can create a differentiation between this toxic masculinity and real men, right?
Yeah.
And real men are leaders. Real men are humble.
Yep.
Real men are meek.
Yep.
And that's and who would not want to follow a man that loves and cares and supports and builds other, and then you're able to create a clear differentiation. Like this is what
Yep.
the world throws at you, but this is what a real man looks like.
Yep.
And people will be attracted to that. Society will be attracted to that. And if you're a young man, women will be attracted to that if you're looking for a wife
right.
or, right?
Yep.
So it's like, somebody that cares. He's not just about himself.
Yep.
He's about building me up, building my family, building whatever, right? So I think that would be very important.
And that's not to say that you shouldn't take care of yourself, right? Like there is room to ensure that you are caring for yourself, right? Your needs.
Yeah.
There is
That distracted me, man.
I know.
Yeah.
There is room for you to master yourself, right? I think that's, I just don't want I don't want people to hear this and go, well, shoot, I shouldn't go to the gym or I shouldn't pursue these other things, because those are good pursuits.
Yeah.
Right. But those shouldn't be your only focus.
Correct. Like the Apostle Paul says, bodily exercise profits little, right? There is a profit to it. So it's not to the, it's like, obviously the Bible talks about us being the temple of God, right? So it's really about focusing on making sure that you are the best tool God has to utilize, right? So if you were like slacking off in different things, God can't use you. So it's like, you got to be physically well, emotionally well, mentally well, financially well, and all those kind of things. But at the same time, that's why he says that we must love, to love our neighbor like we love ourselves, right? So it's not like don't love yourself or don't take care of yourself, but also take that same care you have for yourself and give it to others, right? If you want to feel good, give it to somebody else, right? So
Cool.
That's a good point.
Well, guys, you heard it here. Go build cathedrals. No, thanks guys.
And beards.
And beards. Yeah.
Yes,
Hey man,
yeah.
next time you come on,
I'll get one of those fake Santa beards.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have
It'll be
to.
white.
We
Yeah,
actually
but-
talked about having a fake beard for people who show up without a beard.
See,
but-
I wasn't given this like information
Well,
before
we
I got
haven't
here.
gotten there yet. Okay.
Okay.
It's a work in progress.
Still,
Work in progress.
yeah.
Okay,
you
all
know,
right, okay.
It has to go through the Senate and,
So of course,
and
yeah,
be
yeah.
ratified.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
no, but, well, Sam, thanks for coming on, man. This was a ton of fun. We'll have to have you come back.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for joining us on Beyond the Beard. I hope that you guys got something from this. I got a couple of things that I'm definitely going to be noodling on. But yeah, thanks for joining us this week. And I hope that you guys journey well.
When this silent, you'll be alone, far from friends in life. You'll spend your evenings getting stoned to numb the ache inside.